Okay, so for many of you, you were on the session, I think it was last week or the week before, wasn't it? Where we were talking about foods for general well-being and mental health. This week is Mental Health Week, and the focus is on sleep. And that's why I'm talking to you about how to sleep better during lockdown as well, because that can, for a lot of us, exacerbate sleep issues that we already had due to the sort of the unprecedented circumstances that we find ourselves in. It's interesting. So I'm a nutritional therapist, for those who weren't on the call last time. And basically my job is based in biochemistry. So I did a BSc in nutritional medicine. It is focused on how to bring back wellness, how to bring back health to the body by addressing imbalances in nutrients and in functional medicine. So functional, how well your systems are functioning. And when I see patients on a one-to-one basis, I ask them lots and lots of questions about different systems in the body, such as the digestive system, the immune system, the endocrine system, the nervous system, to name a few. Because as human beings, we are one big chemical reaction. And it sort of makes sense that if we don't have the precursors or the spark plugs, if you like, to make the body go, then the body starts to become out of balance. And that's when ill health starts to manifest. A lot of the time I'm seeing patients who don't necessarily have a named condition. So for example, as in today, they might not be diagnosed with insomnia, for example, but they know that they have sleep issues. It's interesting though, when it comes to sleep, a lot of the time patients are coming to see me due to digestive issues or endocrine problems, and their sleep is not something that they want to focus on. But as we go through the consultation, it's very clear that sleep imbalances are an issue for a lot of these people, a lot of people. And as we go through the session, I'll be talking about why sleep is so important, and how it can affect systems like the immune system. So at the moment, with living with COVID-19, as well as all the other things flying around, sleep is even more important. It's interesting as well, as a nutritionist, there's a lot of talk in the media and in general about diet and exercise, both obviously very important for feeling vital and feeling healthy without the absence of disease. But not much is spoken about sleep. And yet it is so very important to our health. Actually, they're now more and more talking about insomnia being a 24-hour issue, as opposed to it just being during sleep. So as we go through today, again, if you've got any questions, just put them on the chat. Oh. So these are the most common sleep issues that I see in my practice, and I would ask you to have a look at which you think is most relevant to you. So for a lot of people, they wake up feeling exhausted. Now, I'm not saying that people should be bouncing out of bed feeling, with the joy of spring in their step, but when you wake up, you should be feeling refreshed and ready for the day. Two big sort of barometers for me that I know I'm doing my job right is when patients wake up feeling refreshed and hungry. They're two sort of big barometers for health for me. But for so many people, you wake up feeling tired. Feel tired after lunch is another thing, that really big 3 o'clock slump where literally you could fall asleep standing up at your desk, or fall asleep at your desk. So that's something that I'm going to look at today. Another common issue is for people that have felt tired all day and then by the end of the day feel wired and tired and can't get to sleep. And this is a really common problem. So tired on waking, tired after lunch, and then that feeling of I really need to go to bed, but you could literally start your day at 10 o'clock at night. Suddenly you have a clarity of thought, suddenly you have sort of renewed energy, you start cleaning the house or doing all your emails, and basically you feel like you're jet lagged, really. This is the feeling that you want to have at the start of the day, whereas now you're desperately trying to sort of wind down for restful sleep. Then there's also the issue of waking up in the night. So some people are fine getting to sleep, or they use sort of certain crutches like alcohol, for example, which will put them into sleep easily, but then they have the effect of waking up a lot. We are programmed to wake up, but in order, the healthful way is to actually be able to go back to sleep again. But a lot of people find that they're waking up and taking two hours or so to get back to sleep. So I'll be addressing that as well. So I would say, you know, which one of those you more likely fall into, and I'll be doing some troubleshooting for each of those. I would actually like to add on to here for any of the female workforce that are listening, perimenopause, which can start from 40 plus really. So for any of you starting to get into that perimenopausal part of life, the joy of being a woman, this can massively affect sleep. And I see a lot of patients in practice whereby sleep has always been their superpower, and they turn, you know, 44 and suddenly they can't get to sleep, and suddenly they're getting things like anxiety, which is very much a sort of, you know, like I said, that sort of 24-hour insomnia. You can have the insomnia at night and then the exact anxiety as a manifestation of that. Obviously, if you're getting low amounts of sleep, the problem is that it creates a sort of a catch-22. So obviously mood swings and irritability are going to be a lot worse if you haven't had a good night's sleep. And that's often to do with the lowering of estrogen, which is very calming. But we'll talk about that in a bit. So there are 4 stages of sleep. We need at least 5 90-minute cycles, and that's why for any of us that have had young children, you know, that sort of morning and afternoon nap is sort of that 45 minutes, which is generally seen as a sleep cycle. N1 and N2, this is where we fall from being awake to being asleep. If you get woken up at that time, you won't feel groggy, whereas if you wake up in N3, that's your deepest sleep, which is around 2 or 3 o'clock. And the REM is when we're dreaming. So this is our dream time. The brain is awake, but the body isn't. So these are our sort of our 4 stages. And I would say as well, these cycles, in between these cycles, we do drift from being in a very deep sleep to then being more wakeful. And this is a sort of a survival instinct, if you like. Because when we're asleep, we're very vulnerable. You know, when we were cavemen, we were very vulnerable to attack when we're sleeping. So that's why, as well, our senses are still very much acutely working. For example, hearing, which is why, you know, when we go to sleep, it's really important to have quiet in the room, because that noise will keep us awake, and that's because we're programmed to hear, you know, wild animals approaching or danger, because for all of you that were here last time, our bodies haven't changed much in 60,000 years, but our lifestyle and our sort of surroundings have massively. So sleep is our biggest anabolic window in our 24 hours. It's really important if you're training a lot as well. For those people that are exercising a lot, now that we can exercise as much as we like again, just be aware of that the sleep is very important for you to build lean muscle mass. It's very important to reduce any sort of inflammation or any issues with, you know, strains or whatever. It's really, really important. And if you are tending to sort of overtrain or train too much at night, this can affect your sleep. And it can affect your ability to fall asleep, but it can also affect the inflammation in the body, which can actually wake you up. So it's really important for our brain health, and you kind of get that, don't you? If you've had a really good night's sleep, you are able to function a lot better the next day. Your memory, your concentration is much better, and the reason being is that during the day we are making loads and loads of connections. We're learning new things, we're gaining new memories, but actually at night, as you can see from that sort of that image there, the brain increases the cerebral fluid, and it acts a bit like a dishwasher really, increases the fluid in order to drain the brain of toxins. It sort of cleans out the brain, and it actually prunes away all these connections that we don't need, a lot of them. So it's a really important reason, very important for our brain health and our mental health. As I said last time, we are in a world that is giving our brain a ton of messages, many more messages than it ever used to have, even 50 years ago, because we've gone from, having technology 20 years ago, from nothing to having what we have now, which is a constant influx of information and blue light from our screens, and constant stimulation. And the brain actually finds that quite hard to deal with, which is why it can be affected by that, because sleep can be affected by it. But it's really important for your brain to rest and to get rid of this. So much so that there's a lot of research out there with Alzheimer's and not getting enough sleep. And actually Maggie Thatcher used to sort of boast about only being able to sleep on go to sleep for 3 to 4 hours a night, and she suffered with dementia and Alzheimer's at the end as well. And it actually shows there's a reduction in amyloid plaque, which if you have Alzheimer's, there's an increase in amyloid plaque. So that's another really important reason to sleep. It's really important for the immune system as well, which is very topical at the moment. The only thing that stands between us and COVID-19, for example, is our immune system, until a vaccine is found. So it's really interesting that you have two different immune states. You have one immune state that is very on high alert during the day, which is when 60,000 years ago, we would have been more likely to be injured or injure ourselves when we're sort of in the wild, foraging for food and walking long distances. Whereas when you're asleep, you're less likely to injure yourself. So this is when the body makes fresh cells, it creates lots of proteins, it refreshes all your antibodies, it repairs your body as well. And it's really interesting to see. So inflammation is what you get. Inflammation is a term used to show that the immune system is heightened. For example, if you prick your finger with a rose from a rosebud or whatever, it will cause a mark on the skin, and then this sets off this inflammation cascade, as it's called, where certain things are, the ambulances that are running, our innate immune system that's going around our body in our blood the whole time is sent there, creates inflammation in order to heal. But unfortunately, in our world, we have a lot of inflammation. Processed foods can cause inflammation. Obesity, increases in sort of central adiposity can increase inflammation, and sugar can increase inflammation. So we are very sort of inflamed, as it were. So it's very important to keep inflammation in check. And it's interesting that actually the melatonin, our Dracula hormone, our sleep hormone, which is stimulated from the pineal gland deep inside our brain at dusk, is actually anti-inflammatory. So it's actually helping the immune system. And obviously, if you don't have enough melatonin, then you're not going to fall into restful sleep. And therefore, your immune system is going to almost be tricked into thinking it's still daytime, and therefore be on high alert and not have time to replenish itself, which is why sleep is so important. I can't stress as well enough about the importance of vitamin D, and we'll come on to the other nutrients needed for good sleep in a bit. But vitamin D is very much in the news at the moment due to sort of COVID-19. Vitamin D is very much needed if you have acute respiratory distress, which is why it's so been looked into a lot at the moment. And there's been lots of trials with vitamin D in COVID patients. Also, if you have darker skin, if you're, we've seen that there's more likely to be BAME ethnic groups suffering with COVID-19, and obviously there are a lot of other issues there as well. It's not just that, but there could be a link there with vitamin D. If you live in sort of northern hemisphere countries and you have darker skin, then it's quite often the case that you will have lower amounts of vitamin D. But what's also, this is why the sunshine is really important. And thank heavens the weather has been good during lockdown, so we are able to get some. The importance of vitamin D is essential because vitamin D is needed not only for lots of different processes in the body, it's needed to help with calcium absorption. And calcium is very much seen as nature's tranquilizer, which is why traditionally you would have a glass of milk before you went to bed. Vitamin D is also very important for our gut health, which I'll talk about in a bit. But vitamin D is very crucial in sleep hormone synthesis. So it's needed for melatonin, which is why if you've been lying on a beach for a whole day, you can actually feel quite sleepy, can't you, if you've got a bit sun-kissed. So for lots of different reasons, vitamin D is something to consider. And, you can get vitamin D tests. I always say test, don't guess. But if you have got darker skin, then a small, NHS England do suggest 400 IU as a sort of a dropper every day, can help. So this is the ancient body system, which I did allude to in my last talk, the circadian rhythm, which is our sleep-wake cycle. And unfortunately, in our world that we find ourselves in now, the sleep-wake cycle has been totally affected by the fact that our world isn't about light and dark, lightness and darkness. So 60,000 years ago, we would have risen with the sun, we would have eaten as the path of the sun, and then we would have gone to sleep as dusk settled. Whereas now what we do is we're waking up on average 2 hours later than we used to, even 40 years ago. And we're going to bed 2 hours later than we would have done 40 years ago. I mean, if you think about the whole difference in technology over that time, it's been massive, hasn't it? Because we are on this 24/7 society, and the office is on our phone. We're extending out our day artificially. And unfortunately, all that technology is emitting something called the blue light, which actually stimulates adrenaline through the retina, which then tricks the body into needing to stay awake. So we're getting much less sleep because we're not quite so tethered to lightness and darkness, but our body is there's lots of different systems, like the digestive system. So classic kind of sort of disconnect that we have is that we don't eat as the path of the sun. And that's always something that I recommend to patients. As we would have done traditionally, we would have taken most of our food on for breakfast and lunch and had a lighter dinner, whereas now it's the other way around. We're sort of backloading all of our calories into the end of the day, when actually our stomach acid is much lower at the end of the day, and this is what can also affect sleep. Digesting food increases body temperature, and body temperature needs to drop in order to bring on restful sleep, so that's something to think about. But as you see here, the sleep-wake cycle also affects our immune system, as I've already said, but also other endocrine hormones like insulin. So it's just something to be aware of. Melatonin secretion begins at 9 o'clock at night or a bit earlier. If you are a chronic insomniac, one of the best ways to get over that is to camp or to sleep outside, because actually the dusk, the setting of the sun naturopathically stimulates melatonin release, just because there's less light. But actually, if we're sat inside on our screen watching another episode of Normal People or whatever on Netflix or whatever, the body just thinks, oh, okay, I'm still awake, which is why a lot of us get that second wind. So this is something that you can do if you feel that your sleep or your sleep-wake cycle is out of balance. The biggest hormone that affects this is cortisol, which is our stress hormone, but it also is very much related to our circadian rhythm. And unfortunately, cortisol for a lot of us is completely out of whack. So this is an adrenal stress test, and this is kind of how it should look. So basically, cortisol should be the highest at the start of the day, and then gradually throughout the day it should get lower and lower and lower, ready for restful sleep between 10 and 12 p.m. And then gradually throughout the evening it should get higher and higher and higher in order to help you wake up and to make you feel refreshed on waking. But for a lot of my patients, people start up with a low cortisol, and then gradually it gets higher and higher and higher. Cortisol needs to be low here, because if it isn't low, that suppresses the release of melatonin, which, as I said before, is the Dracula hormone, the sleep hormone. And this is why getting cortisol in control is really important for lots of different systems in the body, but especially our endocrine system and our hormone system, and especially for our sleep hormones. I would also point out here, DHEA is another steroid hormone that works in harmony with cortisol. However, if cortisol is elevated, if it's all in these bits, or, I've had people that have been way off the scale with cortisol, just too much stress. If it's way out, DHA will be low. And DHA is a calming hormone, whereas cortisol is stimulating. So that's why on so many levels it's important to get cortisol in check. So this is the problem with our present day society, is that cortisol is disrupting our sleep-wake cycle. And the problem is it creates a catch-22, because if you've had a rubbish sleep, you're not going to wake up and feel like you need to just have a smoothie for breakfast and some fresh juice, or, make yourself a nice breakfast with eggs and avocado and whatever. You are going to reach for caffeine. That's the first thing that you're going to get. So many of my patients wake up exhausted, and then they'll just drink caffeine. They'll just drink coffee or tea without any food, because they feel so tired that they need that stimulant. And unfortunately, this is what's, everything that we put in here throughout the day has a massive effect on how well we sleep from the start of the day. And a lot of that has to do with cortisol. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, if we wake up feeling tired, we will be reaching for stimulants, and we'll be reaching for sugar and less nutritious food. We'll be feeling so sort of fuzzy in the head that we won't think about what to eat until we're really, really hungry and need to eat now. And then we're more likely to go for less nutrient-rich food, which then affects our sleep hormones and our ability to sleep soundly that evening. So, as I said before, for other reasons, blood sugar balancing is really important for sleep. And the reason being is that if you have too many highs and lows, so these highs of blood sugar, then the lows of blood sugar increase stress hormone. So as I've said before, I can't do anything about your external stress, but I can certainly help reduce cortisol in the body. So if you are finding that you're waking up a lot at night, that can be to do with a low blood sugar issue. Because every time we get these low blood sugars at night, that also wakes us up. So the brain, it stimulates the brain to release to increase cortisol in order to release stored glucose from the liver and the muscles to bring up blood sugar. However, the byproduct of that is that it's going to wake you up. Drinking alcohol before bed often helps us fall asleep, but it has the effect of waking us up at night because of this blood sugar curve. So alcohol is sugar. Just see that as sugar. And what it does is that it gives you a sort of nice fuzzy feeling, which helps us fall asleep. And then, the cortisol is stimulated in order to increase blood sugar, but has the side effect of waking us up. So if you are going to drink, just, be mindful of your alcohol intake. Make sure it's a few hours before you go to bed. With caffeine, I would say, have it with food and try to limit it after 2 o'clock. That it really will help. If you're having problems sleeping and you take on a lot of caffeine, that's a really easy win to reduce that. But for some people, it's not that clear what the causes are. So how to control cortisol, how to control our stress levels? Well, blood sugar balancing is key. Limiting alcohol, limiting caffeine. Eating when relaxed. So as I've said before, cortisol can down-regulate lots of systems in the body, and one of those being the digestive system. If you're eating when you're stressed, you won't be absorbing the nutrients from that food as effectively. So eating when relaxed is really important. Hopefully now that we're on lockdown and not sort of rushing around, commuting, rushing from A to B, we have actually got more time to eat. more time to think about food, more time to cook, but also more time to sort of sit and eat it in a more relaxed way. Yoga and meditation, I recommend these if you're very anxious and you're very stressed over HIIT workouts, just because they connect the body, the mind and the body through breath and breathing. All the sort of pranayamas and breathing techniques really do help to reduce cortisol in the body. There's lots of herbs and nutrients that you can take, the adaptogens, ashwagandha, ginger, turmeric, making yourself a fresh ginger and lemon shot if you have a NutriBullet. Just make sure you sieve it before you put it into a little bottle. You can keep that and have a shot of that every day. It's great. I've put here time restricted eating. I feel that for a lot of patients, they are eating, can be over 15-hour period. And with trying to get our circadian rhythm in check, I do recommend very specific eating patterns. When you're jet lagged, and the best way to get over jet lag is actually to eat at the time of where you're at. Eating, it's very important to get us back onto the right kind of circadian sleep-wake cycle, because eating has a massive effect on our insulin levels and our digestive function as well, like bowel movements and things. Keeping them very set every day really will help. But just making sure that you're looking at either 12 hours, ideally 10, from the first moment that you eat or drink anything in the day till the end of the evening, to the end of the day. Because actually, if you're starting to eat your breakfast or whatever at 8 o'clock, restricting no more eating after 8 will really help your body temperature, reduce your body temperature, will help your digestive system so that you can bring on restful sleep. A lot of us are eating too much, too late, which is affecting our sleep. I've just got a question here from Julian. What is a lot of caffeine? I would say anything sort of over 6 cups of tea or coffee. I recommend, 1 to 2, and the rest being decaf, because, decaf tea and coffee has come a long way, but herbal teas. So things like hot lemon and ginger on waking is very good for to stimulate the liver and detox systems, but also it's really hydrating. And when we wake up, we're dehydrated. So I always say on waking to have a glass of water and some bitters and lemon and tea in hot water helps to sort of stimulate the liver, because obviously the liver is in charge not only of our detoxification system, but of digesting fat as well. And I always say, if you can go to sleep having had a tea or coffee as well, that is also a sign that your liver enzymes that are needed to detoxify caffeine, we have a sort of a phase 1 and a phase 2. And if you're able to go to sleep very quickly after caffeine, then that can be a sign that your sort of detox pathway is a bit out of balance, because you shouldn't be able to do that. You should have problems sleeping after caffeine. So setting your bedtime to the same time every day is really important. So many of us are all over the place. But in order to when you set your time, your bedtime every day, this helps stop the second wind, because you might not be feeling wired and tired, but you can start to get that second wind, which is when the body's like, oh, okay, I'm past my bedtime. I need to sort of stimulate cortisol and adrenaline to keep myself up longer. So cortisol is made in these tiny little glands called the adrenal glands, which sit just atop, they're like little bean sizes, just sit atop the kidneys, because they also kick out something called aldosterone, which is needed for a healthy blood pressure. And obviously the kidneys are in charge of blood pressure control as well as filtering the blood. So the adrenals need plenty of vitamin C. And this is what we don't store well, so we need that every day in our diet. But they also need zinc, B vitamins, and protein. Protein is very important. Protein is the building block of the body, and it's the building block of hormones. So all that sort of melatonin, serotonin, our sleep hormones are really, it has a tryptophan is the protein, which I'll come to now. So tryptophan is a protein. That's why protein is very important. And for a lot of us, we're not getting enough healthful protein. We're getting a lot of carbohydrates in our diet, but not enough protein. So that's why I always recommend having protein with every meal and snack. So tryptophan is then you can actually get 5-HTP supplements for any of you who might be suffering with sort of low mood, and it's something that you can think about. Although don't take it if you're on any other medication. But 5-HTP is something that's created from tryptophan, which then goes down to serotonin. And serotonin is our happiness neurotransmitter. It's what makes us feel that sort of deep-seated sense of satisfaction. Most of that is made in the gut, which is why whenever I work with patients with depression or anxiety or OCD or ADHD, so children as well, getting the gut right helps to increase serotonin production. You can never have too much serotonin. Serotonin is very calming. And this is where, you know, when I said earlier about anyone sort of in perimenopause, this is when anxiety and depression can start to manifest, because estrogen is very protective for serotonin as well, helps with serotonin. So that's why there can be an issue there from a female health perspective. But serotonin then goes through to melatonin. So you need the serotonin in order to make the melatonin. If you're suffering with depression or low mood or anxiety, you're probably going to be having some form of sleep issues as well. So we need to make sure that this, you know, this is a biochemical sort of graph that shows how important actually tryptophan is, and getting good tryptophan, getting good protein in your diet is to helping with sleep. So as I mentioned before, your gut health is really important. It's very important for your sleep, specifically because most of our serotonin is made there. That's why we need to make sure that we are getting enough good, healthful fiber in our diet. You know, if you look at the most recent nutrition data survey, which is a rolling survey made by Public Health England, most Brits are very low in fiber. And if they are taking fiber, quite often it's in the form of very abrasive kind of brands or gluten grains. Whereas actually the most healthful form of gentle fiber is from plants, from vegetables and fruit. So increasing you know, a variety of vegetables in your diet. That's why I always recommend, you know, having a veg box delivered is a great way to increase your repertoire of cooking with vegetables, aside from the fact that they're very cheap and very quick to make food from. All of this, all of the sort of the gentle fiber that you get from rainbow coloured fruits and vegetables helps to massage the gut for a start as it goes down, but it also feeds the good bacteria in the gut. If we're not getting enough of this gentle fiber, then our gut bacteria aren't being fed as well. So it's really important, that whole concept of feeding the gut. If we have a gut that for example, classic signs that your gut integrity might be a bit skew-whiff is, you know, constipation, or sort of going from constipation to loose stools, an urgency to go to the toilet, any bloating, gas, colic, you know, trap wind, you know, anything like sort of thrush or itchiness. These are all signs that your gut is out of balance. And a really simple thing to do is, aside from probiotics, is to have you know, to be eating sort of 8 portions of fruit or vegetables a day. Will help to create a much better, more abundant environment for our beneficial bacteria to grow. And short chain fatty acids is something that's very important to help keep the gut barrier sorted. So basically our gut, aside from the skin, which is our biggest barrier against the outside world, it is the gut. This keeps nasty things out of our bloodstream, but it also helps, it's also an essential place for absorption of vitamins and minerals. And if you're constipated, or if you have constipation or rabbit droppings or anything like that, then toxins are more likely to circulate, but also nutrients are going to find it harder to get through the gut wall and be absorbed into the blood. I always say you are what you digest, not what you eat. You know, you can be having the best diet, but if it's not being absorbed, it's a complete waste of time. So leaky gut is something that is talked about a lot, researched a lot. Gluten, for example, you don't necessarily have to be celiac to have issues with gluten. Gluten, I just say, is often a bit of unhelpful food for some people. A lot of us are absolutely fine with it. And the reason being is that it can exacerbate this basically in the gut we have these T junctions that have to be kept at a certain distance apart, and when we eat they come away a bit in order to let things through into the bloodstream, the nutrients to be absorbed. Sometimes gluten can stimulate something called zonulin, which is a gatekeeper of these T junctions, which can actually make them come apart even more and let things through that shouldn't be getting through into the bloodstream. Vitamin D is also very important to keep this gut integrity, to keep our T junctions nice and coming away at the right space, just to let things through that should get through. So that's vitamin D is also very important for gut integrity. But it's just something to be aware of if you are having sleep issues. And actually for all health, Hippocrates said, Hippocrates being the father of modern day medicine, that all disease stems from the gut. So it's just something to be mindful of. It's very important, especially if you're suffering with depression or any kind of mental health imbalance, really very important. So serotonin, so the tryptophan, that's the top part of that sleep hormone synthesis. These are tryptophan rich foods. Excuse me. So these are foods that I like to recommend people with sleep problems to up in their diet. Poultry, chicken, turkey, salmon as well, but also your pulses, chickpeas, so chickpeas, tahini, so hummus, and also to have these in the evening, to have these in your evening meal will help as well. Tryptophan is also present in carbohydrates, so rice, for example, or even things like pasta or bread or anything like that. But it's interesting that if you're going to have carb-rich foods, have it for your evening meal, because what happens is when you eat a lot of carbohydrates, lots of the amino acids, the other proteins, get absorbed into the blood, but tryptophan is still going around and it can actually go through the blood-brain barrier into the brain, and because some serotonin is made in the brain, aside from the gut and the brain, and this can really increase sleep. That's why if you've had lots of carbohydrates at lunchtime, like rice or pasta, that's why you can often feel quite sleepy. I never forget when I worked in Vietnam, all the Vietnamese, after their sort of rice noodles or rice for lunch, would all be fast asleep under the boardroom table. And that's because you do get that serotonin, which also goes to melatonin, makes you sleepy. And it all is because of the tryptophan. Anyway, it's just something to be mindful of if you do find that you get that wired and tired before bed. So as I said before, that vitamin D is coming up not just because of the immune system, not just to help with gut health, but also to help convert tryptophan into serotonin and then into melatonin. Okay, so just make sure you're getting some sunshine. And if you feel like you're not getting enough sunshine, then you can supplement as well. But you also need these other nutrients to help convert serotonin into melatonin, B vitamins. That's why B vitamins, aside from being memory vitamins, they're also calming, and they're really important for the nervous system. But also folic acid, that's traditionally B9, but also magnesium. So for a lot of us, we are low in magnesium. Any sort of signs and symptoms of magnesium, things like twitchy leg, PMS, cramping, migraines, insomnia, because magnesium is very high in foods that generally we don't eat so much of now, leafy greens and nuts and seeds. So any of these foods, to have those in the evening as well, with your evening meal, with your little bit of carbohydrates, is going to help you fall into restful sleep much easier. So this is why, as I said at the start, as a nutritional therapist, if you don't have the right cofactors, if you don't have the spark plugs, you know, I always talk about the analogy of a car, that protein, carbohydrates and fat are like your petrol, and then your spark plugs are your vitamins, minerals and essential fats, omega-3 and 6, which help the car go. If you don't have them, it won't go, however much fuel, however much petrol you've got. But also just to be mindful of gut health, because that's going to help with serotonin. I'm not sure if I said this last time, but in sort of vitro, as a fetus, we would have this big bundle of nervous system cells, and what the body did is it sort of half of the nervous system went to the brain and the spinal column, and the other lot went to the gut. So some at the top of the body and some at the bottom of the body. And, you know, these are connecting all the time, the brain and the gut, hence why you get that sort of feeling of butterflies in the stomach. That's also your second brain. So melatonin, charged up during the day and released at night, being outside will help increase your melatonin by up to 50%. And that, I think, is due to the vitamin D coming in there. But look, it slows down your thinking, it cools the body. And this is really important, a cool body, a cool bedroom, in order to help with restful sleep. But again, melatonin needs magnesium, it needs zinc, and it needs folate. And the great thing about food, and obviously as a nutritionist, I'm very much about food first rather than supplements, although supplements can be can be helpful, but food is just so important. If we all ate more green leafy veg, for example, not only would we be getting good sources of sort of the gentle fiber that massages the gut, but we'd be getting an abundance of magnesium, an abundance of iron, which is often low. Vitamin C is high in green leafy vegetables, but we'll also be getting folate. And folate that's the form that you need it in, folate. That's the most easily absorbed form for the body. Whereas in supplements, quite often, you'll see folic acid, which isn't as readily absorbed. And this is why food is always the first port of call, because it gives you a multitude of different nutrients, not just one, and it gives it to you in a form that the body can read effectively. So yeah, that's for melatonin. So I just wanted to bring into mind the concept of the owl and the lark, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. That concept of the fact that the owl is the lark, I should say, is the you know, you're up at dawn, you're happy, you feel energized, and then towards the end of the day you feel like, oh my god, I need to have a nap, and I need to go to bed early because you've run out of steam. And this is what's called, or you're the kind of person that is more of an owl, so you're really groggy when you wake up, takes you a while to wake up, and then you know, you feel great throughout the afternoon, and into the evening you can stay up a lot later. So there is what's called sort of different chronotypes, and chronotypes are sort of our genetic manifestations. Some of us will be more owl-like and some of us will be more lark-like. And there is sort of talk about how you should, with your long-term partner, ideally one of you should be a lark in order to wake up and make breakfast, get the fire going, 60,000 years ago, whereas the owl would wake up later and then would, you know, in your modern day life, they're more likely to take up the strain of, you know, making evening meal when the lark is feeling really tired. So it is that sort of balance of chronotypes that would make the perfect marriage or partnership. So if you are tired on waking, you know, do filter in the fact that you could be more of an owl chronotype. So these are things that you can do in order to make yourself feel more refreshed on waking. Obviously now we don't have the commute. I'm hoping all of those owls can have a bit longer in bed, and certainly, you know, I've got teenage kids in the house, and I know that teenagers through the teenage years, their circadian rhythm changes by 2 hours. So they're more like, ideally they want to get up at 9. It's a shame really that schools don't alter their start time. You know, it's still very early in the morning, and for a lot of teenagers that's really hard, especially as they're, you know, more likely to be more owl-like and wake up later. So having water on waking, you know, we are dehydrated, more likely to be dehydrated when we wake up. Herbal tea, and wait to have caffeine with breakfast. So caffeine, classic kind of stimulant that stimulates stress hormone and can affect sleep later on. If you have it with food, it has less of an effect. It's like alcohol. If you have alcohol in your stomach, you'll be more drunk than if you had it with food. Don't skip breakfast. So it's about trying to keep the food, eat as the path of the sun, eat as your body clock in the sort of time zone that you're in, GMT. Making sure that you're eating a full breakfast, even if it's at 9 o'clock. Just to make sure that you're not eating too late. I don't want, that's the ideal, is that if you eat earlier in the evening, you will wake up feeling more hungry. So if you aim to eat around 6 or 6:30, you will wake up feeling more refreshed and hungry. So ready to take on the nutrients and the energy when you need it, and from food rather than caffeine. Lamp that gradually lights the wake up your room can help bring you out of sleep more happily. And just taking a 90-minute break, even sort of staring out the window in the morning, will help just to calm your brain. It really helps if you're finding that hard. So the lark can often feel, because they've got up so early, they've been like dashing around, making breakfast for everyone, they've done a really cracking morning work. Quite often, even if they haven't had carbs at lunchtime, they can start to feel really sleepy. And actually, this is when a lark might actually want to have a little nap. I would say, even if it's just 20 minutes, I would say no more than 20 minutes actually, because any more than 20 minutes will affect how well you go to sleep. I sort of see napping as almost like snacking. The more you snack, the less likely you are to eat your main meal. And I want you to eat your main meal. I want you to be able to go to sleep. So even if it's just like a 10-minute or 20-minute disco nap, this can really help a lark. It can really help re-energize them so that they can go till 9 or 10 o'clock without falling asleep on the sofa. Be aware of what you're having for lunch. Too many carbs will make you sleepy, but taking on that whole thing of carbs making you sleepy, that's when you can shunt that to the end of the day meal for those that find it difficult to fall asleep. Wired and tired before bed. So this is the most common issue I have with clients, and this is the classic sign that you're jet lagged. Your cortisol, that circadian rhythm, is out of sync. Looking at that serotonin, that tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin support, as I said earlier. GABA is increasing alpha waves to feel more relaxed. Beta waves are very stimulating. So these kinds of foods to increase. Green tea has something called theanine in, which increases GABA. So GABA is our calming neurochemical or neurotransmitter. Very good if you suffer with anxiety. That carb-rich meal, a few hours before bedtime. Glycine. So glycine is a protein, an amino acid, can be found in cuts of meat. So making your own bone broth, boiling up your carcass from the weekend and having it as a bone broth, just as a drink. Or I usually add mine to ramens or tom yum guys, or if I do wontons or Korean barbecue, whatever, I use that as the stock for the wontons. So this is increasing your protein intake, but also glycine. It's also really good for your skin. So glycine helps with collagen synthesis in the body. Warming foods as well, if you get anxiety. Protein rich foods as well help to, because protein is harder to digest than carbohydrates, for example, this can actually draw the energy away from the brain into the digestive system. So if you do feel that you get that wired and tired and that busy head, having a warming dinner with that carbohydrate, but also the protein, and then along with that, all those magnesium rich vegetables, green leafy vegetables, can help. So making sure that you take away these foods here that are high in tyramine and histamine. So these foods are very stimulating. They increase adrenaline and heart, this is heartbeat. Some people are sensitive to them. So if you feel that you are, cheese and chocolate being the classic ones, not being that sort of synonymous with restful sleep. Epsom bath salts, this is a really old remedy. You don't need to buy expensive ones. You can get these from, the local pharmacy or even the garden centre, just as long as it's just magnesium sulfate. And this actually increases magnesium intake through the skin. So not even, not through food, but through the skin. And actually magnesium can help detoxify the body as well through getting rid of stuff through the skin as well. There are magnesium bath salts out there that have things like valerian in as well, which is a sort of old herb to help bring on sleep as well, which is really nice in the bath. Make sure you buy yourself an alarm clock. Take all technology out the room. Don't have your phone as an alarm clock. Try not to, any of those sort of Alexas or anything like that. All of those, anything with like a blue screen, again, will be stimulating adrenaline through the eyes. You can get special glasses that can emit the blue screen, but I always say, your room should be just about sleep and sex, and that's it. Shouldn't have any technology. There's even research that if you have your phone on airplane mode, but you're using it for an alarm clock, that you're still thinking about what's on your phone. So just to be aware of that. A cool bedroom, so keeping the window open, will help reduce your body temperature, which brings on sleep. Okay. Combating stress and fear. If you are finding that you are getting that wired and tired and anxious thing, just don't watch the news before bed. The fear, when I'm looking at my on my apps, my news apps, the headlines are so crushing and so frightening, and I don't suffer with anxiety, but I certainly have had anxious periods during this time. So if you are someone that suffers, just don't do it to yourself, or just pick 1 or 2 times a day to have a look at the news, and the rest just ignore it. Breathing and mindful techniques, very important to connect yourself back to your body, to anchor your brain back into the body. As I say, I was looking at staring out the window with a wide gaze can help. And obviously exercise. Exercise is one of the best ways to bring down excess cortisol. So finally, with troubleshooting, waking at night, don't worry, we are supposed to have those little breaks in our sleep, which is a survival mechanism to make sure that we're not completely in deep sleep for 8 hours, because that's not good for fending off wild animals or attack. The older we get, we sleep less. So in Ayurvedic medicine, older age responds to more energy in the head. It's called vata, and obviously energy in being energetic in your head is great, but not just before you go to sleep. So again, those warming foods, bringing the energy away into your digestive system can help. Meditation, yoga, also spoken about that. Blood sugar balancing, and just being aware of alcohol and how that affects blood sugar. Also, interestingly, inflammation. If you are very inflamed, that's why people with chronic inflammatory conditions such as fibromyalgia won't sleep well, because cortisol is also the body's natural anti-inflammatory. So if cortisol is high, then that's going to be affecting melatonin and our sleep. So this is very interesting. This is very, this is based on Chinese traditional medicine. I'm not a TCM practitioner, but I do find it interesting naturopathically, which sort of shows this body clock, whereby certain organs in the body are very busy working, and it kind of makes sense that not all the organs are going to be working hard to detoxify or get on with their job all at the same time. So there's this throughout the 24-hour cycle, they have sort of peaks and troughs of when they're working hard. And I do think if you look at the liver, this is, if you tend to wake between 2 and 3, or if you've been out drinking and you wake at that time, that to me suggests that the liver is working very hard to detoxify the alcohol. Because quite often people do wake at that time, especially if they've been drinking. But as you can see, the large intestine is working hard just before you wake up, which is why for a lot of us, if you're very used to your bowel movements at that time, that can be a reason why. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. If you know that you definitely wake up at a certain time, but as I say, it's something that's traditional Chinese medicine. So just to make sure that these rituals are something that you do every single day, getting a pattern is really crucial for healthful sleep. Going to bed when you're sleepy, alarm clock instead of a phone, using the bedroom just for sleep and sex, not watching the TV or using the computer. You're bound to read an email that you really don't want to see just before bed. So just read a book instead. Don't go to bed because you're more like before, in case you get your second wind. So go to bed at a similar time every night. Don't nap in the day if that's not something you usually do. And try not to exercise too late, because this can actually wake you up, as opposed to help reducing the cortisol to help you sleep. So yeah, so that is that's my sleep session. If you've got any questions, let me know. If something springs to mind, you know, in the next day or so, just drop me an email. That's fine. I'm happy to help. And in the meantime, yeah, I hope this helps. As I say, the sort of the big barometers of health generally are waking up feeling refreshed and hungry. They're two big things that I work on with clients. So this should help. Okay, thank you very much.